He lost his daughter at the beginning of the zombie apocalypse and now hides her from everyone. Hello all. This is Jacobson and this is a short retelling of the 7th and 8th episodes of the 3rd season of the zombie series The Walking Dead. You can see the previous episodes at the links in the video description. Thank you so much for participating and for the 1000 subscribers. Hopefully we'll keep it up and by the next video we'll have 1100 subscribers. Once this video gets 100 likes, I will release the next installment. Enjoy watching it. Merle binds Glenn to a chair and interrogates him, demanding to know his group's location. Glenn tries to reason with him by telling him that the group went back to Atlanta to rescue him, as Andrea told Merle when first arriving at Woodbury. Glenn refuses to give up the location, then head-butts Merle, which enrages him further. In the next room, Maggie listens, terrified, as Merle continues to beat Glenn. Meanwhile, near the prison yard gate, a badly injured Michonne takes out a walker before fainting as walkers bear down on her. With Carl's assistance, Rick eliminates the walkers and hoists Michonne's limp body onto his shoulder. Carl assists by grabbing the shopping basket full of baby formula that Glenn and Maggie had scavenged. In the prison common room, Rick revives Michonne and asks for her name, but she keeps quiet. Daryl interrupts to summon the group to the cell block. Before he leaves, Rick locks Michonne in the room. Rick sees Carol and embraces her. Poor thing fought her way into a cell, Daryl explains. Must have passed out, dehydrated. Beth brings the baby over, and Carol realizes Lori is dead. I'm sorry, she tells Rick tearfully as they hug. Michonne watches them from behind the bars. In Woodbury, Milton alerts the governor that a Mr. Coleman is ready. Without offering details, the governor asks Andrea for help. Back at the prison, Michonne informs the group that Glenn and Maggie were kidnapped. She tells them about Woodbury, a town of 75 that's run by this guy, calls himself the governor. Pretty boy, charming, Jim Jones type. She offers to help them penetrate the town's perimeter. A beaten and bloodied Glenn tells Merle his friends are coming for him, boasting of the group's size and strength. Rick, Shane, Dale, Jim, Andrea, he says. Is that right? Merle replies, smirking at Glenn's bluff, for Andreas, now a resident of Woodbury, and had informed Merle of Jim and Dale's demise. Rick, Daryl, and Oscar decide to rescue Glenn and Maggie. As they load a car with weapons, Rick pulls Carl aside, instructing him to keep the group safe if he doesn't make it back. Carl asks Rick if they can name the baby Judith, after his 3rd grade teacher. I think Judith's a fine name, Rick says, smiling. Then, the rescue team, including Michonne, departs. Back in Woodbury, the governor drops Andrea off at Milton's lab, where an elderly man, Mr. Coleman, lies in a hospital bed. After the governor thanks Mr. Coleman for his service, Milton begins. He rings a singing bowl and instructs Andrea to start a record player. Addressing Mr. Coleman, please raise your right hand off the bed if you recognize any of the following statements to be true, Milton says. Your name is Michael Coleman. Mr. Coleman raises his hand. Milton then asks about Mr. Coleman's family, and Mr. Coleman again lifts his hand each time. Glenn still refuses to reveal his group's location, so Merle unleashes a walker in the interrogation room and leaves. Still bound, Glenn manages to smash his chair against the back wall, then stabs the walker through the head with the splintered chair arm. Back in the lab, Milton tells Andrea the purpose of their experiment. I've been trying to determine whether trace memory and human consciousness exist after the subject has transformed, he explains. Mr. Coleman is about to die from prostate cancer and will reanimate as a walker. When that occurs, Milton hopes he will still respond to the cues. There is no conscious mind, Andrea counters. When they turn, they become monsters. That's all. Shortly afterward, Mr. Coleman dies. Andrea and Milton strap him to the bed. Meanwhile, the governor and Merle discuss Glenn's unwillingness to cooperate. The governor decides to question Maggie himself. The governor cuts Maggie's bonds and offers to return her to her group. When she gives him the silent treatment, he orders her to remove her shirt and bra. He unbuckles his belt with weapons, sidles close, shoves her head against the table, and threatens her. To which she replies, "Do whatever you're going to do, then go to hell." He scoffs at her defiance and then leaves the room. Meanwhile, the rescue team encounters a herd of walkers in the forest and flees to a cabin. Inside, a hermit threatens to shoot them, but he is slowly talked down by Rick. When Rick grabs him, he breaks free and dashes for the door. Michonne stabs him through the back with her sword. They throw his body to the walkers as a distraction and escape through the back door. Back in Milton's lab, Mr. Coleman awakens as a walker and Milton recites the cues, but has no progress. When Mr. Coleman ambiguously moves his hand in response, Milton reaches over to undo the arm restraint. Despite Andrea's protests, Mr. Coleman lunges, so Andrea stabs him in the head. Shaken, Milton asks to be left alone. Merle brings Maggie, who's still topless, into Glenn's room. "We're through with games," the governor says. "One of you is gonna give up your camp." He raises his gun at Glenn. Prison. Maggie blurts, revealing there are 10 survivors who set up camp after clearing the walkers inside. Merle believed the prison, located near Noonan, Georgia, to be impenetrable, but his theory had been debunked. The governor pretends to soothe Maggie, and then thrusts her at Glenn. Back in his apartment, the governor berates Merle about the prison. "This group, with your brother at its core, has done something you told me couldn't be done," he says, questioning Merle's allegiance. Merle insists he will not side with his brother. The governor sends Merle and Martinez to scope out the prison. Meanwhile, Rick and the rescue team sneak up to the Woodbury perimeter. Andrea joins the governor at home and pours herself a drink. She reports that Mr. Coleman died, disproving Milton's theory. She slides into the governor's arms. "It's all right, it's over now," he says softly. A burly survivor, Tyrese Williams, his younger sister Sasha, and their fellow survivors Ben, Alan, and Donna, fight their way through a walker herd in the forest. Donna gets bitten, but Tyrese has enough compassion to bring her along until her husband Alan and son Ben are psychologically ready to let her go. The group seeks refuge in a crumbling building that is revealed to be the backside of the prison. Andrea tells the governor she wants to help Milton cremate Michael Coleman. He hugs her and says, "Woodbury's starting to grow on you." In his secret room, the governor opens Penny's cell. She runs out but is stopped short by a chain around her neck. He sings a lullaby and caresses her as she snarls at him. He then realizes that Penny is staring at the meat in the bucket and not him. "Look at me, baby," he says. Getting no response, he yells in frustration and thrusts her back in the cell. In the interrogation room, Glenn Rhee and Maggie Green huddle several feet away from the walker that Glenn killed. Maggie confirms that the governor didn't rape her. Glenn yanks off the walker's arm, snaps the forearm in half and hands Maggie a shard of bone to use as a weapon. At Woodbury's perimeter, Rick Grimes and the rescue team deliberate their next move. Michonne disappears but soon returns, having found a point of entry. The governor tells Merle Dixon about his plan to wipe out Rick's group and let walkers repopulate the prison. He suggests Merle enlist Daryl as their inside man. Nothing happens to Daryl, Merle clarifies. Of course not. The governor reassures Merle, ordering him to bring Glenn and Maggie to the Screamer Pits before Andrea finds out about them. Back at the prison, Axel flirts with Beth Green, and Carol Pelletier warns Axel to stay away from her. "Maggie's with Glenn, and you're a lesbian," he replies, noting the lack of available women. Carol clarifies that she's not a lesbian, then leaves when Axel gets flirtatious. Meanwhile, Merle goes to collect Glenn and Maggie but the two stage an ambush. Maggie stabs one of Merle's men, Warren, in the throat but before they can overpower Merle, a group of Woodbury soldiers enter and restrain them. Rick and the rescue team follow the sound of gunfire into the warehouse where Glenn and Maggie are being held. Rick releases a smoke grenade, enabling the group to escape with Glenn and Maggie. As gunfire erupts in the street, the governor tells residents to hunker down at home. He tells his men, "We are under attack. Don't take any chances trying to take prisoners. You shoot to kill." The rescue team regroups in Woodbury's distribution center, where Glenn tells Daryl that Merle is alive and working for the governor. "He was gonna execute us," Glenn says. Daryl wants to find Merle to try and convince him to let them go, but Rick insists that he stays by his side. The governor confers with his men and tells Andrea to check in on the residents. She wants to fight, but he ignores her request. Meanwhile, Michonne sneaks into the governor's apartment and waits for him to return. The rescue team makes a run for the wall. Andrea, disobeying the governor, shoots at them, not knowing who they are. She tells the governor she spotted a man in a prison jumpsuit. Black guy, young, she says. Escaped convicts, he tells her. As they escape, Rick hallucinates Shane Walsh emerging from a cloud of smoke. Momentarily stunned, he watches as Shane shoots Oscar dead. Rick guns him down, only to realize that it wasn't Shane, but in fact a Woodbury resident. After yelling to an unresponsive Rick, Maggie shoots Oscar in the head to prevent reanimation. The group climbs over the wall and hides in the bushes to plan their next course of action, although Daryl and Michonne are still missing from the group. At the prison, Carl Grimes and Herschel Green hear screaming coming from the tombs. Herschel attempts to stop Carl from investigating the noise, but decides to let him go. Carl investigates and finds Tyrese's group fighting walkers in the boiler room. He urges them to follow him. Back at the governor's apartment, Michonne hears a thumping noise, leading her to discover his secret room. She unchains Penny, thinking it's his daughter and he has locked her up, before realizing she's a walker. As she positions her sword to kill Penny, the governor comes in. Horrified to find Michonne holding Penny hostage, he surrenders his gun. "Don't hurt my little girl," he pleads. Michonne, disgusted, stabs Penny through the head, killing her. The governor, overwhelmed with grief and anger, attacks Michonne in a rage. As the two grapple, Michonne smashes his walker head aquariums and pulls them off the shelf. The governor starts to throttle her and drag her towards a snapping walker head. Michonne manages to grab a shard of broken glass and stabs him in the eye. The governor reels as Michonne prepares to finish him off with her katana. But then, Andrea walks in and draws her gun on Michonne. The two face off, but ultimately, Michonne flees. The governor cradles Penny's body, devastated. Meanwhile, Carl leads Tyrese's group into the prison common room and insists that Donna be killed since she was bit in the arm by a walker before entering the prison with the others. "We take care of our own," Tyrese says. Sasha objects when Carl locks them in the room, but Tyrese points out this is the best living situation they've had in weeks. Back in Woodbury, Dr. Stevens places gauze over the governor's ruined eye. Andrea demands an explanation for his fight with Michonne, the walker heads in the tanks, and Penny. He tells her he forced himself to look at the heads to prepare him for the outside world, but evades her other questions. Merle, Haley and Milton check in on the governor, asking what happened. "I was attacked," the governor says, glaring at Merle. Merle's previous lie about killing Michonne is now apparent. Just outside Woodbury, Michonne rejoins the rescue team as they wait for Daryl. Rick demands to know why she disappeared and threatens to kill her. She reminds him that he still needs her help rescuing Daryl and getting Glenn and Maggie back to the prison. In the arena, the governor addresses the town's citizens, declaring that Woodbury was attacked by Rick's group, whom he calls terrorists, and accuses Merle of betraying the people of Woodbury. His men drag Daryl into the arena as proof of Merle's complicity. "Kill them," the crowd chants. Andrea stares at Daryl, stunned. You townspeople cheer as the episode fades to black. The end of the Link Home and the 8th series. As soon as this video gets 100 likes and 20 comments, I'm releasing a sequel.